Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku gained cosmic awareness. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was screaming. It was a symphony of agony, a chorus of crumbling concrete and superheated air. The sky over Jaka City was no longer blue, but a bruised, weeping canvas of smoke and ash, illuminated by the hellish orange of Endeavor's flames and the sickly violet of an unknown villain's power. For Izuku Midoriya, the world had been reduced to this single, apocalyptic stage. And on it, he danced with the demon. Tamura Shigaraki, or the thing wearing his face, stood amidst the devastation as if he had been sculpted from it. His body, a grotesque tapestry of stitches, raw muscle, and scarred skin, seemed to drink in the surrounding despair. Decay spread from his feet in lazy, obsidian waves, turning entire city blocks to dust with an indifferent touch. He wasn't just a villain anymore. He was an endpoint. A human-shaped extinction event, and the voice that came from his lips was not the raspy whine of the man-child Deku had fought before. It was older, smoother, a baritone laced with centuries of smug superiority. All for one. Is this it, ninth? The voice purred, a hand gesturing lazily to the panorama of destruction. Is this the peak of one for all? Broken bones, shallow breaths, and a heart full of pointless, naive hope? I've seen greater sparks from a dying firefly. Deku's body screamed louder than the dying city. His left arm was a shattered mess, held together by the sinewy black whips of Daigoro Banjo's quirk, which felt less like a support and more like a grim tourniquet. His right leg buckled with every shift in weight, the bones inside grinding like gravel. The green lightning of One for All, usually a vibrant corona of power, now flickered around him like a faulty neon sign, spitting and sputtering. He had been using One for All at 100%, a feat that should have been impossible, for what felt like an eternity. His body was a vessel filled past the breaking point, cracks spiderwebbing through the porcelain. You won't win! Deku gasped, blood and saliva dribbling from his lips. Each word was a Herculean effort, stolen from lungs that felt like they were full of glass shards. Shigaraki tilted his head, a gesture of mock curiosity that was chillingly inhuman. Won't I? Look around you, Izuku Midoriya. Your master's great flame, Endeavor, is reduced to a glorified street lamp, holding back my Nomu. Your little friends are scattered, fighting for scraps of survival against my lieutenants. The very ground you stand on despises you. I have already won. This, he said, taking a step forward, the ground turning to gray powder beneath his boot, is merely the victory lap. Deku's mind raced, a frantic, desperate search for a solution. He could feel the vestiges of One for All stirring within him, a maelstrom of fear, anger, and grim resolve. He's too strong, ninth. The voice of the second user was sharp, a shard of ice in his mind. His regeneration is instantaneous. His body has stabilized. We're burning through our reserves just to keep you standing. The boy's right, Nana Shimura's voice added, softer but filled with an ironclad dread. Tashinori defeated him with a final, definitive blow. But this vessel, it's perfect. It's all for one's quirk combined with a body that can withstand the strain of multiple quirks far better than his original ever could. It's his magnum opus. I can still fight. Deku muttered aloud, forcing his body into a crouched stance that sent waves of agony shooting up his spine. Shigaraki laughed, a dry, grating sound. Fight? You're a battery running on empty. A legacy of failures passed down from one dying fool to the next. But don't worry. I will put it to good use. One for All will finally come home. He lunged. It wasn't a burst of speed like Deku's. It was more like reality itself bent to move him. One moment he was 30 feet away, the next his hand was reaching for Deku's face, fingers splayed, glowing with a sickly, soul-stealing light. Instinct took over. Deku activated Float, launching himself backward, the air screaming past his ears. Black Whip erupted from his arms, latching onto the skeletal remains of a skyscraper and yanking him skyward. Below, Shigaraki followed, propelled by his own array of stolen quirks, a predator closing in on its wounded prey. This was it. The final exchange. Deku knew it in his bones, the ones that weren't broken, at least. He couldn't outrun him. He couldn't outlast him. The conventional strategies, the 100% smashes that had worked before, were like throwing pebbles at a mountain. The mountain simply didn't care. He needed something more. Something that All Might himself couldn't do. The singularity, Yoichi Shigaraki's voice whispered, a faint, fragile echo from the very genesis of the quirk. The power has stockpiled for so long, it's reached a critical mass. It's becoming something new. The vestiges had warned him about this. That the sheer power of One for All was approaching a point where it would warp and transcend its original function. They saw it as a danger, a potential self-destruction of the quirk. But in this moment of absolute desperation, Deku saw it as his only hope. If he was a battery, he would just have to short-circuit the entire grid. "I won't let you take it!" Deku roared, his voice raw. He stopped his ascent, hovering in the ash-choked air, a lone green star against the black sky. He pulled all the flickering remnants of One for All into his core. It felt like trying to hold a star in his cupped hands. The power didn't just fill him, it threatened to unmake him. He could feel the vestiges recoiling. "Ninth, no! You don't know what will happen! Your body can't." But it wasn't about his body anymore. Shigaraki was upon him now, his face a mask of triumphant greed. "It's over, hero!" His hand shot forward, aimed at Deku's forehead. The gesture was slow, deliberate, savoring the moment of ultimate theft. Deku met the advance. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't fire a blast of air. He did something far more fundamental. He took the singularity, the boiling, transcendent core of One for All, and pushed, not with his fist, but with his will. He opened the floodgates, letting the entirety of the stockpiled power, 9 generations of hope, struggle, and sacrifice, surge outward to meet the all-consuming void of All for One. The moment their quirks touched, the world did not explode. It stopped. The screaming of the city, the roar of Endeavor's fire, the frantic cries of his friends, it all vanished. There was no sound. No light. No heat. There was only a single, infinitesimally small point where Deku's will met All for One's greed. For a fraction of a second, there was only pressure. A metaphysical force so immense it felt like the entire universe was being compressed into the space between them, and then it cracked. It wasn't a physical crack, but a crack in perception. In reality itself. The crack shot through Izuku Midoriya's consciousness, and his soul fell through the hole. His physical body was still there, locked in a stalemate with Shigaraki, a silent statue in the sky. But his mind was gone. He was falling. Or rising. Or expanding. The concepts were meaningless. His sense of self, the anchor of Izuku Midoriya, dissolved like sugar in water. The first thing to go was the immediate battlefield. He no longer saw heroes and villains, but constellations of life energy. He saw Katsuki Bakugo, not as his childhood friend, but as a blazing, explosive son of ferocious pride and deeply buried fear. He saw Shoto Todoroki as a perfect, stark binary of ice and fire, a duality of self-loathing and self-acceptance in constant, beautiful equilibrium. He saw Achiko Uraraka as a warm, gentle gravity, a quiet but immense force of love that bent the world around her. He saw their quirks not as biological abilities, but as raw code. Bakugo's was a string of violent, percussive chemical reactions. Todoroki's was a theorem of thermodynamic manipulation. Uraraka's was a gentle subversion of one of the universe's fundamental laws. He saw them all, every hero, every villain, every civilian cowering in a basement miles away, as intricate, glowing tapestries of energy and information. Then, his perception tilted on its axis, and he fell deeper. Time itself became a fluid. He saw Bakugo again, but this time he saw it all at once. He saw a toddler with sweaty palms, creating tiny, harmless pops that made his parents cheer. He saw a 10-year-old bully, his face twisted in a sneer, standing over a quirkless, weeping Izuku. He saw the young man he was now, screaming his name in fury and terror. He saw a future pro-hero, standing atop a mountain of victories, a grim smile on his face. He saw an old man, his hands scarred and still, looking out at a peaceful sea. He saw a corpse in a hero uniform, lying in a field of rubble. All these Bakugos existed simultaneously, layered over each other like transparent sheets of film. Every potential, every past, every present, all visible in a single, gut-wrenching moment. The floodgates were open. He saw it all. He saw Uraraka's first steps, her telling her parents she wanted to be a hero for them, her first kiss, her wedding day in one timeline, her lonely death in another. He saw Ida's life as a straight, rigid line of duty and honor, with a single, jagged crack in the middle named stain. He was drowning in the lives of others, and then the tide turned on him. Birth, pressure, darkness. A muffled, rhythmic thumping. Fear. Not his fear, but someone else's. A woman's. Her love for him is a tangible force, a supernova of warmth and anxiety. Then, a blinding light, a gasp of cold air, a scream torn from lungs that have never known anything but fluid. He is small, helpless. He sees a beautiful, tear-streaked face with kind green eyes. His mother. The name Izuku is a soft song. Diagnosis. The doctor's office is sterile, cold. The light is too bright. He's 4 years old, swinging his little red shoes, clutching his all-might action figure. The doctor's words are clinical, devoid of emotion, quirkless. The word hangs in the air, heavy and gray. He sees his mother's face crumble, her hope fracturing like a dropped plate. He feels her pain more than his own. That night, the video of All Might plays on the computer monitor, the hero's booming laughter a cruel mockery. Can I be a hero too? The question is a tiny, fragile boat in a vast, storming ocean. His mother's hug is an apology, a shield, and a cage all at once. Inheritance. The taste of salt and sweat on Dagoba Beach. The sun is setting. All Might, skeletal and bleeding, holds out a single strand of his golden hair. Eat this. The hope is so bright it's painful, a pure, white-hot fire that scours away a decade of despair. The power settles in his stomach, a dormant sun. It feels like coming home to a place he's never been. The memories weren't memories anymore. They were happening. He was living them all, right now, simultaneously. His entire life, from the womb to this very moment, was a single, continuous experience, and then he felt past even that. He saw futures, a future where he defeated Shigaraki, became the symbol of peace, and grew old, surrounded by his friends and family, a content smile on his face. A future where Shigaraki's hand connected, and the world went dark as One for All was ripped from his soul, leaving him a hollow, broken shell. A future where the clash of their quirks tore a hole in the fabric of the city, killing everyone for miles, including his friends. He saw their last moments, felt their terror and confusion. 1,000 futures. 1,000,000. An infinity of them branched out from this single point in time, each one as real and as valid as the next. He saw himself die a hero's death. He saw himself die a coward's death. He saw himself become a villain, twisting One for All into an instrument of tyranny. He saw himself give up and become a civilian. He saw a life where he never met All Might at all, and lived and died as a quirkless, unremarkable man. The sheer volume of it all was a psychic scream that threatened to tear his sanity to shreds. The ego, the identity of Izuku Midoriya, was a sandcastle being washed away by the cosmic ocean, and still, he fell deeper. He fell out of his own life, out of humanity. He left the earth behind, the blue marble shrinking until it was just another point of light. He flew through the silent, velvet black of space. He saw the birth of a star, a slow, magnificent gathering of cosmic dust and gas over millions of years, culminating in a silent, brilliant flash of nuclear fusion. The sight was so beautiful it was a physical pain. He witnessed a supernova, a star 100 times the size of the sun collapsing in on itself, and then exploding in a cataclysm of light and energy that seeded entire galaxies with the building blocks of life. He heard its death not as a sound, but as a final, booming chord in the symphony of creation. He drifted into the heart of a nebula, a celestial nursery of pastel pinks, deep blues, and vibrant purples, where new worlds were being spun into existence. He saw the formation of planets, the cooling of molten rock, the first drops of rain on a barren world that would, in 1 billion years, teem with life. He saw the timeline of the universe itself, from the explosive singularity of the Big Bang to the slow, cold, entropic heat death trillions of years in the future. He saw galaxies collide, their spiral arms passing through each other like graceful ghosts. He saw black holes, points of impossible gravity, warping spacetime around them like a thumb pressing into a sheet of rubber. And it was there, in the absolute, fundamental architecture of the cosmos, that he finally understood. Quirks. They weren't just a biological fluke that started in Qingqing City. He could see it now. The universe operated on a set of fundamental, unchangeable laws. Gravity. Electromagnetism. The strong and weak nuclear forces. For eons, these rules were absolute. But then came humanity. And with humanity, a new force, consciousness. Belief. Will. And the collective psychic energy of billions of souls over millennia had begun to push against the rigid laws of reality. It had created a strain, a tension in the fabric of space-time. The first quirk wasn't a mutation. It was a crack. It was the universe's source code, for the first time, being edited by its own creation. Quirks were a fundamental violation of physics, a patch of code written in a new language that allowed humans to tell reality what to do. Float told gravity to reconsider. Explosion told thermodynamics to hurry up. All for one was a master key, a root-level command that could copy and paste the code of others. One for all was a program that endlessly compiled and strengthened itself. He saw the threads. Luminous, gossamer strands of cause and effect, connecting every action to every consequence across all of time and space. He saw how the choice of a single protozoan in a primordial ocean eventually led to the birth of the man who would become all for one. He saw how a chance encounter between two people in the 19th century led to the bloodline that would produce Ochiko Uraraka. It was a web of infinite complexity, beautiful and terrifying, and he was seeing all of it at once. He was a god, perceiving all of creation. And he was an ant, crushed beneath the weight of that perception. The overload was absolute. The human mind, the 3-pound lump of gray matter that was Azuka Midoriya, was not built for this. It was like trying to pour the entire Pacific Ocean into a single teacup. The teacup did not just overflow. It ceased to exist. A failsafe, buried deep in his primitive hindbrain, finally tripped. The sheer, overwhelming need for survival. His consciousness, scattered across all of spacetime, slammed back into his body with the force of a meteor strike. Pain. The first sensation was pure, unadulterated physical agony. His bones, his muscles, his nerves, everything was on fire. The backlash from the uncontrolled release of One for All had shredded him on a cellular level. But the physical pain was a distant, welcome distraction from the noise. The noise. The cosmic symphony hadn't stopped. It was just quieter, a deafening background hum beneath the restored sounds of the battlefield. He could still feel the thrumming life force of everyone in the city. He could still see the faint, shimmering threads of causality linking everything together. He could feel the Earth's rotation, the gentle tug of the moon's gravity, the solar winds washing over the planet. His eyes fluttered open. The world was too much. The colors were painfully vibrant. The details were overwhelming. He could see the individual dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny world. He could see the stress fractures in a nearby piece of rebar, calculating instinctively that it would collapse in 17.4 seconds. The stalemate had been broken by a wave of pure, concussive energy from their impact point. He and Shigaraki had been thrown apart. Deku was lying in a crater, his body a broken puppet. Shigaraki was several dozen yards away, on one knee, his body steaming. The monstrous regeneration was working, but it was slower. The blast had momentarily overwhelmed even him. All for One's calm facade was gone. Shigaraki's face was twisted in a snarl of confusion and rage. What was that? Shigaraki hissed, more to himself than to Deku. The heroes and villains, all of whom had been knocked flat by the energy release, were beginning to stir. The first to reach Deku was not a medic. It was a blonde ball of incandescent rage. DKU! Bakugo skidded to a halt beside the crater, his gauntlets smoking, his face a mask of fury, confusion, and a deep, terrified concern he would never admit to. What the hell was that? He screamed, his voice raw. Get up! Don't you dare lie there! What did you do? Deku's eyes tried to focus on him. But he wasn't just seeing Katsuki Bakugo, his friend, his rival. He was seeing the tangled, chaotic knot of temporal threads that made up his existence. He saw the pride and the insecurity, the love and the hate, The hero he was and the villain he could have been, all woven together in a complex, agonizing pattern. He saw the thread of his own life, a bright green cord, hopelessly intertwined with Bakugo's explosive orange. Pulling on one would inevitably yank the other. They were all connected. Everything was connected. He tried to speak, to explain the horrifying, magnificent truth that had been burned into his soul. But the words wouldn't form. His brain was a shattered mirror, reflecting a million different realities at once. He couldn't grasp a single, coherent thought. All he could manage was a whisper, a fragment of the immense truth that was crushing him. His eyes were wide, unfocused, looking not at Bakugo but through him, at the infinite web beyond. The threads, he breathed, his voice a dry rasp. A look of dawning, cosmic horror filled his features. Kaken, they're all tangled. Bakugo stared at him, his rage momentarily forgotten, replaced by a chilling sense of unease. Deku wasn't looking at him. His eyes were filled with a terrifying, ancient wisdom. He looked like a man who had just stared into the face of God and found it broken. What are you talking about? Bakugo demanded, his voice softer now, laced with fear. Deku, what's wrong with you? But there was no answer. The strain of reintegrating an infinite consciousness into a finite, broken body was the final blow. The last of his strength gave out. The input became too much. The noise, the colors, the threads, the pain, it all converged into a single point of overwhelming white. His eyes rolled back in his head. The faint green light of One for All died out completely. Izuku Midoriya's body went limp, his head lolling to the side. He did not fall into the gentle quiet of unconsciousness. He fell into a black, silent abyss, his last waking thought not one of pain or fear, but a single, devastating realization. I can still see everything. From the ground, Shoto and Endeavor saw the confrontation end. They saw Bakugo rush to Midoriya's side. They saw the young hero's limp form, his face eerily blank. The battle, for a moment, was forgotten. The greatest threat was not the decaying villain staggering to his feet, but the horrifying stillness of their greatest hope. The war had reached a stalemate. But for Izuku Midoriya, a far more terrible battle had just begun. The return was not a gentle drift to shore but a violent, deep-sea ascent. Izuku Midoriya's consciousness, which had been scattered like dust across the vast, cold expanse of space-time, was being violently reeled back into its mortal container. He came up through layers of reality, each one more complex and suffocating than the last. First came the silent, gravitational waltz of celestial bodies, then the slow, inexorable march of geological time on 1,000 worlds. Then came the chaotic, buzzing layer of life, a planetary chorus of birth, consumption, and decay. Finally, he breached the surface, and the noise of humanity crashed down upon him like a tidal wave. He was in the abyss, the black, silent void from the end of the battle, but it wasn't silent at all. It was screaming. He was a radio receiver tuned to every station at once. I really hope Tanaka-san in accounting approves my overtime. My back is killing me. Did I leave the stove on? God, I miss her. That last hit from the Nomu is going to cost the city billions in infrastructure repair. My son's grades are slipping again. Maybe I should hire a tutor. I'm so scared. What if the heroes can't stop them next time? Thoughts. Millions of them. A discordant flood of mundane anxieties, profound griefs, secret hopes, and simmering fears. They weren't just words. They were fully formed emotional states that washed over him, each one a distinct color and temperature in the psychic ether. He felt the collective fear and grief of the nation, a post-war trauma shared by millions, as a constant, low-grade fever, a dull pressure building behind his own eyes. Then, a single, clear sound cut through the chaos. Beep. 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 It was the closest thing to him, a metronome marking out a fragile rhythm in the overwhelming symphony. He focused on it, not just hearing the sound but perceiving it. He saw the electrical signal traveling from the monitor, through the wire, to the pads on his chest. He felt the faint spark as it measured the depolarization of his heart's sinoatrial node. He felt the muscle contract, a tired but resolute squeeze, pushing blood through arteries that were still knitting themselves back together. It was his heartbeat, a fragile, biological anchor in a sea of cosmic noise. He clung to that rhythm, using it to pull the scattered fragments of his identity together. Izuka Midoriya. My name is Izuka Midoriya. The thought was a lifeline. Slowly, other immediate sensations filtered through. The starchy, clean scent of hospital linens. The cool, regulated air flowing from a vent above, a controlled current in the otherwise still room. The faint, persistent hum of the fluorescent lights, a perfect 60 Hz cycle he could feel in his teeth. And then he saw the bird. His eyes were still closed, but he saw it. A small, brown sparrow had landed on the windowsill outside. His perception didn't just register its presence, it unfolded the creature's reality. He saw the intricate, hollow structure of its bones, the rapid flutter of its four-chambered heart. He felt its simple, instinctual drives, the search for food, the wariness of predators. And he saw its future, not one future, but a branching cloud of possibilities. In one shimmering timeline, the sparrow took flight to its left, found a dropped crust of bread near the hospital cafeteria, and flew off to feed its fledglings in a nest tucked under the eaves of the support course building. He saw the nest in perfect detail, the 3 tiny, gaping beaks, the soft down lining. In another, equally real timeline, it took flight to its right. A hawk, circling lazily 200 feet above, would see the movement against the pale hospital wall. He saw the hawk's dive, a breathtaking plummet of predatory grace, the sparrow's moment of panicked realization, the sharp, final impact, and the hawk carrying the limp body to its own perch to be torn apart. Both futures were real. Both were happening. He could see them both, feel them both, laid over the present like ghostly afterimages. The sparrow, oblivious, chirped once and hopped along the sill. The overwhelming nature of it all, the thoughts, the grief, the impossible choices of a simple bird, was too much. A wave of nausea, both physical and psychic, rolled through him. With a monumental effort of will, he forced his eyelids open, hoping the familiar sight of the real world would ground him. It was a mistake. The sight of the real world was worse. The plain, white acoustic tiles of the ceiling weren't just the ceiling. They were a landscape of miniature peaks and valleys, a porous terrain of pressed mineral fiber. He could see the way the light from the window caught on every single imperfection, every microscopic ridge. He saw the dust motes dancing in the sunbeam, not as specks, but as complex agglomerations of dead skin cells, fabric fibers, and pollen, each tumbling through the air according to its own intricate physics. The world hadn't come into focus. It had come into an unbearable, infinite resolution. He squeezed his eyes shut again, a choked gasp escaping his lips. The beeping of the heart monitor next to him sped up, a frantic counterpoint to the storm in his head. Footsteps in the hall. He didn't just hear them. He felt the vibrations through the floor, saw the intent of the person making them. A nurse. Female, mid-40s. Name, Akina Saito. She was worried about him, but she was also distracted by the memory of an argument with her teenage son that morning. Her concern for him was a gentle, pastel blue energy. Her frustration with her son was a spiky, irritable orange. The colors swirled around her as she approached the door. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Midoriya? You're awake. He couldn't answer. He couldn't open his eyes. He could only lie there, paralyzed by the sheer, unfiltered torrent of reality. His heart rate is spiking, her voice said, closer now. He could smell the faint trace of coffee on her breath and the antibacterial soap on her hands. I'll page recovery girl and Mr. Aizawa. He heard her step away, the soft tap-tap of her communicator. Each tap sent a new ripple of information through him, the electrical signal, the transmission of radio waves, the reception at the other end. It was exhausting. He wanted to scream. He wanted it to stop. He wanted the blissful ignorance of not knowing, the simple peace of a world that was just what it appeared to be. But the universe, having shown him its true face, was not inclined to let him look away. The next few days were a blur of managed torment. Recovery girl's healing kisses soothed his broken body, but her quirk was useless against the wounds in his mind. She, Aizawa, and a team of specialists ran every test imaginable. Neurological scans, quirk analysis, psychological evaluations. The results were maddeningly inconclusive. His brain activity was off the charts, firing in patterns they had never seen before, but there was no physical damage. His quirk, one for all, seemed completely dormant, unresponsive. To them, He was a medical mystery, a soldier suffering from the most profound case of combat shock in recorded history. To Deku, he was a prisoner in a cell made of everything. He learned to keep his eyes closed as much as possible. It didn't stop the visions, but it reduced the visual input to a manageable degree of chaos. He learned to focus on his own breathing, the simple in and out mantra against the tide of external thoughts. But it was a losing battle. The echoes of infinity were relentless. The first visitor he was cleared to see was All Might. Deku felt him coming long before the door opened. He felt the shift in the hospital's emotional climate, a wave of respect and hope rippling through the staff as the skeletal form of Tashinori Yagi walked the halls. He felt the man's own emotions, a deep, aching pride, a gnawing fear for his successor, and a profound, bone-deep weariness that had nothing to do with his injury. The door slid open. Young Midoriya? Deku forced his eyes to open. And his breath caught in his throat. He didn't see one man. He saw a collage, a living, tragic timeline standing in the doorway. Layered over the frail, sunken-chested form of Tashinori was a ghost of shimmering gold. It was All Might in his prime, a giant of a man radiating an energy so bright it was like looking into the sun. The power of one for all in him was a roaring, perfectly controlled bonfire, a symbol of absolute conviction. Deku could feel the adoration of millions that had been directed at this phantom, a psychic weight that the golden man carried with an effortless, dazzling smile. But beneath that golden god, the current Tashinori was a flickering candle, his life force a pale, guttering flame in a gathering wind. Deku could see the scar tissue on his lung not just as a wound, but as a dead zone in his energy field, a black hole that slowly leached his vitality. And overlaid on them both, a third image, a future echo, transparent and cold. It was an old man, far older than Tashinori was now, lying in a quiet, sunlit room. His face was peaceful, the lines of worry finally smoothed away. And Deku saw it, the moment. He saw the last, gentle flicker of the candle flame, the final, soft exhale, and the peaceful, silent stillness that followed. He didn't see a date or a time, but he saw the event, the final, quiet closing of a legendary chapter. The thread of All Might's life, once a brilliant golden rope, was frayed down to a few delicate, silver strands. He could see the exact point, somewhere in the not-too-distant future, where the last strand would snap. The vision, the knowledge, was so absolute, so devastating, that a sob escaped Deku's lips. Young Midoriya? Izuku, what's wrong? Tashinori rushed to his bedside, his face etched with alarm. He placed a bony hand on Deku's shoulder. The touch was electric. A lifetime of information flooded through Deku. He felt Tashinori's first clumsy attempts to use One for All, the mentorship of Nana Shimura, the soaring joy of his debut as a hero, the agony of his first fight with All for One, the crushing weight of being the symbol, the lonely nights spent coughing up blood, the desperate hope he felt when he first met a quirkless boy on a rooftop. It all poured into him in a single, overwhelming second. You were so bright, Deku whispered, his eyes wide with tears, looking at the golden phantom that only he could see. Tashinori frowned, his concern deepening. I'm right here, my boy. It's okay. The war is paused. You did it. You stopped him. Stopped? Deku's laugh was a broken, hollow thing. The concept of stopped was meaningless. He could see the threads of All for One's influence still woven through society, the seeds of chaos he'd planted that would sprout for decades to come. He could see Shigaraki, healing in a hidden location, his hatred a pulsating, cancerous star. Nothing was stopped. It was just a lull in the storm. I tried to explain, Deku said, his voice a jumble of tenses, his mind struggling to articulate an impossible concept. But the threads, when I pushed, when he pulled, they all tangled together. I see you. I see all of you. The you that was and the you that will be. He looked at Tashinori's chest, right where the future vision had shown his life ending. It's so quiet at the end. You won't be in pain. Tashinori's face went pale. He pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned. The boy was making no sense. He was delirious, speaking in riddles, talking about the future as if it were a memory. This wasn't battle fatigue. This was something deeper. Something had broken inside his successor. The singularity, Deku mumbled, his gaze turning inward. It wasn't about power. It was about scope. The container cracked. He pointed a trembling finger at his own head. The container, Izuku, All Might said, his voice firm but gentle, trying to anchor him. Listen to me. You're in the hospital at UA. You're safe. Your friends are safe. You need to rest. But Deku was shaking his head, a look of profound loneliness on his face. Safe? You can't see it. The weight. The sheer weight of it all. Every choice. Every consequence. I feel them. I feel all of them. He looked at his mentor, his eyes pleading for an understanding that he knew was impossible. I'm sorry, All Might. I'm so sorry. I know how it ends. Tashinori stared at him, his heart a leaden weight in his chest. He saw not a victor, but a casualty. The boy who had always carried the weight of the world on his shoulders now looked as if the world had finally, irrevocably crushed him. He quietly excused himself and made a call to Recovery Girl, his voice low and urgent. We need to bring in a specialist in mind-affecting quirks. Immediately. Something is terribly wrong. The visit from his friends was a different kind of torture. He felt them coming, a familiar constellation of energies. Ida was a straight, rigid line of blue light, a beacon of order and duty. Uraraka was a soft, pink nebula of warmth and gentle gravity. Todoroki was a stark, mesmerizing binary, a sphere half of glacial blue and half of solar orange, locked in a perpetual, silent war with itself. They entered the room with hesitant smiles and bouquets of flowers that assaulted Deku's senses with a cloying cloud of complex organic compounds and the faint, sad echo of their own life cycles. Deku-kun, Uraraka said, her voice bright, but Deku felt the undertow of her deep anxiety. We were so worried. How are you feeling? How was he feeling? The question was a cosmic joke. He was feeling the tectonic plates shifting under Japan. He was feeling the collective despair of the stock market reacting to the Jaku incident. He was feeling the unrequited crush of a third-year student in the business course for Mirio. He was feeling the echo of a supernova that had exploded 3 million years ago, its light just now reaching his retinas. He settled tired. Ida stepped forward, chopping the air with his hand in a gesture that was so quintessentially him. Understandable. You exerted yourself beyond all logical limits. As your class representative, I must insist you focus entirely on your recovery. We have taken copious notes for you, so you will not fall behind in your studies. As Ida spoke, Deku saw his timeline spooling out. A life of unwavering dedication, of rules and regulations. He saw the single, violent fracture in that timeline, the dark alley in Hosu, the glint of Stain's blade, the thirst for a vengeance that went against every rule Ida had ever lived by. He saw how that event had changed the composition of Ada's thread, weaving a dark silver of trauma and experience into the otherwise pristine blue. He saw a future where Ida became a hero who founded his own agency based on rigid ethical protocols, an agency that would do immense good but would also fail to adapt to a more chaotic world. He saw the entire arc of his friend's life, a story already written, and it made the earnest, passionate young man in front of him seem like a puppet going through predetermined motions. Uraraka placed the flowers on his bedside table. They said you were unresponsive at first. We were so scared. He looked at her, and the branching possibilities were so numerous, so poignant, that it stole his breath. He saw a timeline where he had the courage to tell her how he felt after the school festival. He saw the quiet, happy life they built together, a small, warm bubble in a dangerous world. He saw another timeline, a dark, terrible one, where his battle with a future villain inadvertently put her in harm's way. He saw her fall. He felt his own scream of agony from that possible future as if it were his own. The vision was so real, so visceral, that he physically flinched away from her. Her smile faltered. Deku-kun? He couldn't look at her. The risk was a quantifiable thing to him now. His proximity to her increased the probability of that dark timeline manifesting by 17.4%. To protect her from a future that only he could see, he had to sever the thread in the present. I need to focus, he said, his voice flat and cold. It was the only way. He had to build a wall. Todoroki, who had been standing silently by the door, spoke up. His voice was a low rumble. You seem different. Deku's eyes flicked to him. Shoto Todoroki. The living embodiment of a war. Deku saw the strands of Endeavor's ambition and abuse wrapped around Todoroki's very core, like thorny vines choking a sapling. He saw the defiant energy of his mother's quirk fighting back, a frost that preserved a part of him that Endeavor could never touch. He could feel the constant, subatomic battle within him, the hot and cold particles vying for dominance. He saw a future where Todoroki finally found equilibrium, not by choosing a side, but by fusing them, becoming a hero of breathtaking power and quiet wisdom. He also saw a future where the internal conflict shattered him, turning him into a volatile, dangerous recluse. The path between those two futures was a razor's edge, and Deku could see every single choice that would push him one way or the other. "We're all different after what happened," Deku replied, his voice empty of the warmth and sincerity they associated with him. He was a stranger wearing their friend's face. The three of them exchanged worried glances. The vibrant, emotional, crying Izuku Midoriya they knew was gone. In his place was this hollow, distant being. They tried to keep the conversation going, talking about their classmates, about the reconstruction efforts, about how Bakugo was driving everyone insane with his frustrated yelling. But Deku offered only monosyllabic answers. He wasn't with them. He was adrift, his gaze fixed on the wall behind them, though he wasn't seeing the wall. He was watching the chaotic dance of infinite possibilities, the lives his friends would live, the deaths they would die, the joys and sorrows they had yet to experience, all playing out in a silent, agonizing ballet. The silence grew heavy, awkward. Finally, Uraraka picked up the now empty vase. "Well, we should let you rest. We'll come back tomorrow." Deku didn't answer. He just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. They left, their hushed, worried whispers following them down the hall. "What's wrong with him? He's never been like this. It's like he didn't even see us." He heard them. He felt their hurt, their confusion, their fear for him. And he knew he was the cause of it. He was pushing them away, poisoning his most precious relationships, because his mind was too crowded to make room for them. He was an island, surrounded by a storming ocean of everything, and the isolation was a cold, physical ache in the center of his chest. Alone again, he closed his eyes. But the darkness was no comfort. It was a canvas, and on it, his cursed awareness painted masterpieces of despair. He saw the thread of his own life, a vibrant green cord that had once been so simple. Now it was a horrifying nexus, a knot from which a trillion other threads, past, present, and future, spooled out in every direction. It was connected to everything, and in being connected to everything, it was connected to nothing. He was Izuku Midoriya, the boy who wanted to save everyone. And he was now a being who could see everyone, every moment of their lives, every possible tragedy. And he was utterly, completely, and totally alone. The weight of that knowledge pressed down, and for the first time since he was 4 years old and told he was quirkless, he felt truly, hopelessly, powerless. The hospital room had become a torture chamber of sensory overload. The rhythmic beep of the monitor was a countdown to nothing. The hum of the lights was a drill boring into his skull. The muffled sounds from the hallway were a ghostly chorus of lives he could not save. Izuku Midoriya lay adrift in the center of it all, a castaway on a raft of hospital linens, drowning in an ocean of unfiltered reality. His body was healing, mending its shattered bones and torn muscles with the miraculous efficiency of Recovery Girl's quirk. But his mind was fraying at the seams. The specialists had come and gone, their faces a rotating gallery of concerned frowns and baffled expressions. They spoke of dissociative fugues, of post-traumatic stress on an unprecedented scale. They used words like psychogenic and neurocognitive schism. To Deku, their diagnoses were like trying to describe a hurricane by analyzing a single drop of rain. They couldn't see the storm. He had tried to sleep, but sleep offered no escape. His dreams were not dreams. They were uncontrolled dives into the cosmic ocean. He would find himself experiencing the fall of the Roman Empire from the perspective of a single, terrified brick in the Colosseum, or witnessing the formation of a methane sea on Titan. He would live entire lifetimes in the span of a few minutes, as a 14th-century peasant in France, as a sentient gaseous cloud in the Orion Nebula, as a version of himself that had become a bitter, resentful police officer. He would wake up screaming, His own name a foreign word on his lips, the psychic residue of a dozen other lives clinging to him like grave dirt. He was losing himself. The core of his identity, the earnest, hopeful boy who cried at the drop of a hat but never, ever gave up, was dissolving in the universal acid of his new awareness. He was becoming a passive observer, a ghost watching a million movies at once, none of which truly mattered because they were all just fleeting moments in an infinite reel. Desperation was a cold, sharp point pressing against his sanity. He couldn't go on like this. He needed a shield. An anchor. A place to hide. And in the depths of his despair, a memory surfaced, not a memory from a past life or a possible future, but his own. A memory of a dark, stardusted space within himself. A world within a world. The vestiges. He closed his eyes, shutting out the painfully vivid hospital room. He ignored the thoughts of the nurse down the hall and the probabilistic futures of a dust bunny under his bed. He turned his focus inward, a difficult, painful process like trying to swim against a tsunami. He searched for the familiar thrum of One for All, the dormant sun that had once burned so brightly within him. He found it, but it was different. It wasn't the roaring bonfire he had shared with All Might, nor the vibrant green lightning he had learned to control. It was a still, silent, black expanse, a pocket universe of absolute quiet, dotted with faint, distant stars. It was the only place in all of existence, it seemed, that wasn't screaming at him. With a final, desperate push of his will, he plunged into it. The transition was instantaneous. The hospital room vanished. The cacophony of the world was muted, replaced by a profound, humming silence. He was standing in the familiar mental landscape of One for All, a void of deep indigo and black. But something was fundamentally changed. The space felt larger, vaster, as if the crack in his own consciousness had expanded this internal world as well. The stars here were sharper, brighter, and seemed to go on forever, and the vestiges were waiting for him. They stood in a loose circle, their forms more solid, more defined than he had ever seen them before. They were not the hazy, dreamlike figures of the past. They were real, their energy signatures as distinct and clear to his new perception as living people. Daigoro Banjo, the fifth user, stood with his arms crossed, his usual roguish grin absent, replaced by a look of intense concentration. Haikid Shinomori, the fourth, sat in a meditative pose, his gaunt-faced form radiating an aura of unsettling calm. And the sixth had his face buried in one of his smoke-wreathed hands. The second and third users stood apart, their identities still shrouded, their silhouettes sharp and wary. But it was Nana Shimura and Yoichi Shigaraki who stepped forward. Nana's expression was a mixture of profound pity and fierce determination. Her energy was a warm, protective embrace, a stark contrast to the cold void around them. Yoichi, the first user, looked fragile and ephemeral as always, but his eyes held a shocking clarity. They were the eyes of a man who understood. His energy was not a fiery star or a protective shield. It was a quiet, unshakable point of light, a single, stable note in a universe of chaos. Ninth, Nana said, her voice echoing in the vast emptiness. It was the first sound he had heard in days that didn't feel like an assault. You came. We were worried you were lost. Deku looked down at his own hands. Here, in this space, they were whole and unscarred. He felt no pain. He heard no extraneous thoughts. For the first time since the battle, he felt a flicker of something resembling peace. I don't understand what's happening to me, he whispered, his voice cracking with the strain of his long silence. The world, it's too loud. Too bright. I see everything. All of it. All at once. Yoichi glided closer, his form leaving no footprints on the non-existent floor. You did not just clash with my brother's quirk, Izuka Midoriya. You clashed with a fundamental constant of the universe, consumption. And in response, One for All, pushed to its absolute singularity, became its opposite, perception. The singularity wasn't a power-up, Nana elaborated, her gaze soft but firm. It was a phase shift. Think of your consciousness as water. It has always existed as a liquid, confined to the riverbed of your own life, your own linear time. But in that moment, the pressure and energy were so immense that you flash vaporized. You became a gas, expanding instantly to fill the entire container of space-time. Deku's mind reeled, but here, in the quiet, the analogy made a horrifying kind of sense. But I can't condense back. I'm still everywhere. I'm still a gas. Precisely, Yoichi said. Your consciousness has become unmoored from its singular, physical anchor. You are no longer just Izuku Midoriya, the boy in that hospital bed. You are a nexus point, a quantum superposition of all possible Izuku Midoriyas. You are experiencing the totality of your own existential probability wave. The clinical explanation did little to soothe the terror. How do I stop it? How do I make it go back to the way it was? A sad, knowing look passed between the vestiges. It was Shinomori, the fourth user, who answered without moving, his voice a dry rasp. You can't. The universe has shown you its source code. You cannot unsee it. That door, once opened, cannot be closed. A wave of despair, cold and sharp, pierced the fragile peace of the mindscape. Then I'm trapped? I have to live like this forever? No, Nana said, her voice ringing with authority. You are not trapped. You are untethered. You don't need to close the door. You need to learn how to live in the bigger room. You need to learn control, and we are going to teach you. We are your only hope, ninth. We exist within one for all, a pocket dimension outside of linear time. We are the only ones who can comprehend what has happened to you because, in a way, we are already unmoored ourselves. Yoichi raised a slender hand. The first lesson, and the most important, is anchoring. You are everywhere, so you must learn to choose to be somewhere. You are everywhere, so you must learn to be now. How? Deku pleaded. By focusing on the undeniable truth of your physical self, Yoichi explained. The gas must remember what it's like to be water. You must cling to your own, singular, biological reality. The feeling of the air filling your lungs. The rhythm of your own heart. The pressure of the ground beneath your feet. These sensations are your lifeline. They are the coordinates of the here and now. When the infinite ocean threatens to pull you under, you must grab hold of this anchor. It sounded too simple. A spiritual platitude in the face of a cosmic horror. But as he looked into Yoichi's ancient, understanding eyes, he felt a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in days. Hope. When you return to your body, Nana instructed, do not try to block out the noise. That is a battle you will lose. Instead, listen to it, and find your own signal within it. Find your heartbeat. Find your breath. Focus on it. Let it become louder than everything else. Anchor yourself to the vessel. We will be here to help. The mindscape began to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a training ground. He spent what felt like hours there, though time had no meaning. The vestiges worked with him, their combined consciousness a focusing lens for his own scattered mind. Daigoro Banjo, surprisingly, was an excellent teacher of grounding, forcing Deku to focus on the imagined kinetic energy of his own body, the feeling of muscle and bone and movement. Shinomori, the recluse, taught him a form of mental isolation, not to block the world out, but to build a quiet, fortified space within his own mind where he could process the incoming data without being overwhelmed. Finally, Yoichi looked at him. It is time. You cannot hide in here forever. Go back. And anchor. With a deep breath that was both real and not, Deku let go of the mindscape. The peaceful silence shattered, and the screaming symphony of the hospital room crashed back in on him. Another double shift. I'm exhausted. This coffee is terrible. Probability of systemic infection in patient 307 is 12.6% over the next 48 hours. Did she get my text? The Nikkei index dropped another 50 points. The noise was just as bad as before. His first instinct was to panic, to retreat back into the void. Find your signal, ninth. Nana's voice was a clear bell in the chaos, an echo from the mindscape. Listen, he forced himself to obey. He pushed past the stock market reports from a broker's mind 3 blocks away, past the anxieties of the nurses, past the groans of the building's foundation. He listened. Beep. 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 The heart monitor. But he went deeper. Beneath the electronic sound he found the source. A faint, wet, rhythmic thumping in his own chest. TH thump. TH thump. He focused on it. He poured all of his shattered concentration into that one, simple, biological fact. Th thump. Th thump. He felt the muscle contract. He felt the valves open and close. He felt the surge of warm blood pushing through his aorta. It was his heart. It was him. He added his breath. He felt the cool air entering his nostrils, the slight rasp in his healing throat, the expansion of his diaphragm, the slow rise and fall of his chest. In. Out. In. Out. Th thump. Inhale. Th thump. Exhale. The external noise didn't vanish. But it receded. It became background static instead of a deafening roar. The thoughts of others became whispers at the edge of a room instead of screams in his ear. The infinite futures of the dust bunny became a faint shimmer instead of a blinding strobe light. He was still aware of it all. But he was no longer drowning in it. He was floating, anchored by the simple, undeniable reality of his own body. He opened his eyes. The room was still painfully detailed, but he could hold a stable image. He could see the white ceiling as just a white ceiling. He could see the four stand as just an four stand. He was looking, not perceiving. A profound sense of relief washed over him, so potent it left him dizzy. He had found a foothold. The change in his demeanor was immediate and dramatic. When Recovery Girl came in for her morning checkup, she found him sitting up in bed, his eyes open and focused. He was pale and gaunt, but the terrifyingly vacant look was gone. "Midoriya?" she said, approaching cautiously. "Good morning, Recovery Girl," he said. His voice was hoarse, but it was his. She blinked, surprised. She ran her diagnostics, checking his vitals. "Your heart rate is stable. Your brainwave patterns are still abnormal, but they're less chaotic." "What's changed?" He gave her a small, tired smile. "I think I'm just learning to adjust." The news spread quickly. All Might Aizawa and his friends were overjoyed, if confused. They saw a recovery, a return to normalcy. They didn't understand that he hadn't returned to their world, but had simply learned how to stand upright in his own. The final test of his new control came a week later. He was physically healed, cleared for light activity. Aizawa, on the advice of the vestiges whispering in Deku's mind, arranged for a controlled sparring session. Not to test his power, but to test his focus. His opponent, of course, was Bakugo. They stood in one of UA's smaller training gyms, Gamma Gym. The air was cool and smelled of ozone and sweat. Bakugo stood opposite him, cracking his knuckles, his expression a volatile mix of relief, impatience, and suspicion. "So you're finally done playing zombie, huh, Deku?" he growled. "Don't think I'm going easy on you. I want to see what that freaky light show was all about." Aizawa stood on the observation deck, his arms crossed. "Bakugo, this is a diagnostic session. Minimal power. Focus on movement and response. The goal is to assess Midoriya's combat readiness, not to level the building." Yeah, whatever," Bakugo snarled, his palms already starting to smoke. Deku closed his eyes for a moment, his gloved fists clenched at his sides. He could feel it all. The hum of the gym's ventilation system. Aizawa's analytical worry, and Bakugo. Bakugo was a bonfire of emotion and intent. He felt the raw kinetic energy building in his palms, the twitch of his shoulder muscles as he prepared to lunge, the chain of tactical thoughts firing in his brain, feint left, blast right, follow up with an aerial AP shot. The old Deku would have been overwhelmed. The traumatized Deku would have been paralyzed. But now he anchored. Th thump. Inhale. Th thump. Exhale. He centered himself in his own body. The external data became just that, data. It was no longer a sensory assault. It was a tactical overlay, cool and impersonal. "Begin!" Aizawa's voice boomed. Bakugo exploded forward, just as Deku knew he would. He feinted left, a cloud of smoke and noise, then unleashed a powerful right-handed blast aimed at Deku's center mass. Deku moved. He didn't dodge. Dodging implies reacting to a threat. He simply wasn't there. He took a single, fluid step to his right, the edge of the explosion harmlessly searing the air where he had been a nanosecond before. His movement was calm, efficient, utterly devoid of his usual frantic energy. Bakugo's eyes widened fractionally. The move was too clean, too precise. He corrected instantly, firing off a series of smaller, rapid-fire AP shots. For Deku, it was like watching a child throw slow-pitch softballs. He could see the trajectory of each blast before it fully formed. He saw the minute muscle contractions in Bakugo's arm that dictated the angle, the flicker of intent in his mind that preceded the action. He moved through the barrage like a dancer, weaving and sidestepping with an unnatural, minimalist grace. He wasn't predicting. He was knowing. "Stand still, you damn nerd!" Bakugo roared, his frustration mounting. He launched himself into the air, spinning, preparing his signature howitzer impact. This was a mistake. Deku saw it laid out like a blueprint. He saw the strain it would put on Bakugo's shoulder, the momentary window of vulnerability it would create upon landing, the exact burn pattern it would leave on the floor. But he didn't need to wait for the landing. As Bakugo reached the apex of his spin, Deku let a tiny fraction of his awareness flow. He didn't activate one for all. He didn't need to. He simply looked at a point on the floor to Bakugo's left and perceived a possibility. In his mind, he saw a timeline where Bakugo's rotation was off by a single, minuscule degree. He let that perception, that tiny nudge on the threads of causality, bleed into reality. Bakugo's spin faltered. It was an error so small no normal observer would have noticed, a shift of a centimeter. But in a high-velocity aerial maneuver, a centimeter was a mile. His balance was thrown. The carefully contained energy of his howitzer impact dissipated unevenly. He landed hard and off balance, stumbling forward, and Deku was there. He hadn't moved fast. He had just moved to the right place at the right time. His hand came up, not in a fist, but with an open palm. He didn't strike Bakugo. He simply placed his palm gently on the center of Bakugo's chest. The fight was over. Bakugo froze, chest heaving, his eyes wide with disbelief. He was panting, sweating, adrenaline coursing through him. Deku stood before him, perfectly calm, not even breathing hard. His hand was a steady, unmovable weight on his chest. He could have ended it. A flicker of one for all, even 1%, would have sent him flying. But he hadn't. "What?" Bakugo breathed, his voice a confused whisper. "How did you?" Deku removed his hand, his expression unreadable. He had won. He had effortlessly, completely, and totally defeated his lifelong rival without throwing a single punch or using his quirk. And the victory felt nothing. There was no joy. No relief. No satisfaction. It was a clinical, detached process. He had analyzed the data and executed the most efficient solution. He had seen the entire fight before it happened, a solved equation. It was like watching a recording of a game he already knew the outcome of. The passion, the struggle, the heart-pounding thrill of battle, it was all gone, replaced by a cold, omniscient certainty. He looked at Bakugo's furious, confused face, and for the first time, he felt a new kind of pain. He had gained a power beyond imagination, but in doing so, he had lost something fundamental. He had lost the thrill of the unknown, the fire of competition, the shared struggle that had, in its own twisted way, always connected him to Kaken. Up on the observation deck, Aizawa lowered his binoculars, a deep, unsettling feeling coiling in his gut. He had just witnessed a perfect, flawless victory. Midoriya hadn't just dodged, he had flowed. He hadn't just won, he had dismantled his opponent's every move with an unnerving, almost bored grace. It wasn't the fighting style of a passionate young hero, it was the fighting style of a god. And it was terrifying. The sterile peace of the hospital room was replaced by the familiar, lived-in chaos of the Alliance Heights dorms. Izuku Midoriya was home. The words should have brought comfort, a sense of return, but home was no longer a sanctuary. It was just a smaller, more intimate echo of the screaming world. His classmates welcomed him back with a boisterous, heartfelt party. There were handmade welcome home Deku banners, a mountain of his favorite katsudon prepared by Sato, and a cacophony of cheerful, overlapping conversations. It was an outpouring of love and relief, a testament to the bonds he had forged. And for Deku, it was an exquisite form of torture. He sat on the common room couch, a bowl of untouched katsudon on his lap, a polite, vacant smile plastered on his face. He was anchoring, the mantra of th thump, inhale, th thump, exhale, a constant, humming undercurrent in his mind. It kept him from being swept away, but it couldn't deafen him to the noise. He looked at Mina Ashido, laughing as she recounted a story, and saw a branching future where a misstep during a patrol in 3 years would lead to a severe acid burn on her own face, a disfiguring injury that would send her into a spiral of depression. He saw Kaminari, joking with Zero, and felt the low-level anxiety humming beneath the humor, the fear that one day he would discharge too much electricity and cause irreparable brain damage, a fear so deeply buried he barely acknowledged it himself. He saw Kirishima, arm wrestling with Tetsu, and perceived the subtle, microscopic stress fractures forming in his friend's bones from constant hardening, a cumulative price for his quirk that would lead to chronic pain in his late 30s. Every laugh was shadowed by a possible sob. Every moment of youthful joy was tainted by the cold, hard data of future suffering. They were all beautiful, brilliant flames of life, and he was the only one who could see the encroaching darkness that threatened to snuff each of them out. The desire to save them, to warn them, to fix it all, was a physical ache in his chest, a scream building in his throat that he had to constantly swallow. But what could he say? Mina, in 3 years, don't step on that specific patch of rubble? Kaminari, you have a 4.7% chance of aneurysm if you exceed your wattage limit by 200%? He would sound insane. He would be a prophet of doom, poisoning their present with the terror of a future that might not even come to pass. His new awareness had twisted his oldest, most fundamental drive. I want to save everyone was no longer a heroic aspiration. It was a curse. It was the mandate of a god, and he was still just a boy in a hero costume. The true, crushing weight of this burden fell upon him not in a battle, but on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. He was walking through the main Yui courtyard, on his way to his first class back. The sun was bright, the air was crisp, and the campus was bustling with the mundane energy of a school day. He was anchoring, focusing on the crunch of gravel under his red sneakers, the weight of his backpack, the cool morning air on his face. He was managing, and then he saw her. She was a student from the General Studies course, a girl he vaguely recognized but didn't know. She had short, purple hair and was laughing at something on her phone as she walked. To anyone else, she was just a face in the crowd. To Deku, she was a symphony of impending tragedy. As she passed him, his perception flared unbidden. He saw the intricate web of her life. He saw her love for old, black and white movies. He felt her excitement about her date that Friday with a boy from the business course. He saw her dream of becoming a quirk historian, and he saw the thread of her life, a gentle, violet cord, coming to an abrupt, violent end. It wasn't a possibility. It wasn't a branching path. It was a certainty, a knot in the timeline that was pulling tight. He saw it with sickening clarity. A drunk driver in a speeding truck would run a red light at a specific intersection in Mizurufu at 8:14 p.m. that evening. Her thread, by a cruel twist of cosmic coincidence, was destined to intersect with that exact point in space-time. He saw the screech of tires, the shattering of glass, the final, panic thought in her mind, a simple, heartbreaking "oh." Before the thread was severed and her light went out, he froze in the middle of the courtyard, his blood turning to ice. The world around him faded to a gray, blurry backdrop. All he could see was this girl, this walking, talking, laughing ghost, with a countdown timer floating above her head that only he could perceive. Save her. The instinct was overwhelming, primal. It was the very core of his being. This wasn't a villain attack. It was a random, senseless, cruel twist of fate. But he could stop it. He could intervene. His mind raced, processing variables at an impossible speed. He could run to her, tell her not to go out that night. But what reason could he give? He'd be a crazy person, a stalker. He could try to stop the drunk driver, but he didn't know who he was or where he was coming from. The only variable he could control was her. He had to do something. He started walking, his path angling to intercept hers. His heart hammered against his ribs, not with the thrill of action, but with the cold terror of playing God. He came alongside her, his mouth dry. Excuse me," he said, his voice cracking slightly. The girl stopped, surprised. Her eyes widened as she recognized him. Oh, you're Izuku Midoriya, from the hero course. Hi, he stammered, his mind blanking. What now? I just wanted to say, be careful today. Her brow furrowed in confusion. Oh. Okay. Thanks. No, I mean, really careful, he insisted, his voice taking on a desperate edge. Especially tonight. Maybe just stay in. Don't go out. It's not safe. The girl's friendly expression shifted to one of wary concern. She took a small step back. Is this some kind of hero warning? Is there an alert I don't know about? No. I mean, yes. He was failing. He could feel her polite fear, her desire to get away from the weird, intense hero student who was accosting her. He was doing more harm than good. Think. Anchor. Analyze. He saw the threads again. He saw that his direct interference was creating a new set of possibilities, new tangles. He was scaring her. He was making things worse. He needed a different approach, a less direct intervention. His eyes darted around, his mind processing the environment. He saw a sprinkler head embedded in the grass a few feet away. He saw the path of the water pipes beneath the ground. He saw the maintenance schedule in the mind of a groundskeeper half a mile away. This zone's sprinklers were due for a pressure test at noon. It was now 8:30 a.m. An idea sparked, a dangerous, manipulative idea born of his new abilities. I'm sorry, he said, forcing a sheepish smile. That came out wrong. I'm just a little jumpy since the war. Post-traumatic stress, you know? It was a lie, but it was a plausible one. What I meant to say was, I think you dropped this. He bent down, pretending to pick something up from the grass near her feet. In the same motion, his fingers, buzzing with a microscopic, barely their charge from One for All, tapped the ground with a precise amount of force, not enough to break anything, but enough to jostle the aging internal valve of the sprinkler head he had identified. It was a calculated risk, a 78% probability of success. He stood up and held out his empty hand. Oh. Never mind. I thought it was a key or something. My mistake. Sorry to bother you. He turned and walked away quickly, his heart pounding. The girl stared after him for a moment, thoroughly weirded out, before shaking her head and continuing on her way. He didn't go to class. He found a secluded bench with a view of the courtyard and waited, his leg jiggling with unbearable anxiety. He watched as the girl met up with her friends. He watched her through her morning classes, his mind a remote viewing camera. He felt his own anxiety mirrored in the minds of his friends, Uraraka, Ida, Todoroki, as they noted his empty seat in class, their worry for him a distant, painful hum. At 11:58 a.m., he held his breath. The girl and her friends were crossing the same patch of lawn, on their way to lunch. Right on schedule. A hiss, then a spray. The faulty sprinkler head he had tripped burst to life, 3 hours ahead of schedule. A powerful jet of water shot out, drenching the laughing group of students. There were shrieks, then laughter, as they were soaked to the skin. Oh my God, my phone! The purple-haired girl cried out, clutching her bag. And my clothes are ruined! I can't go on my date like this, her friend laughed. Guess you'll have to cancel, or show up looking like a drowned rat. The girl groaned in frustration. I'll have to call him. This is so embarrassing. Deku watched them run off towards their dorm, complaining and laughing. He slumped back against the bench, a wave of relief so profound it made him feel weak. He did it. He had changed the future. He had nudged the timeline. He had saved her life. He was a hero. The feeling of triumph lasted for approximately 5 seconds, because as the relief washed away, the perception returned. He looked at the altered thread of the girl's life. The violet cord no longer ended abruptly that evening. It now stretched on, and he saw where it went. He saw her go on to finish her degree in quirk history. He saw her get a job at a prestigious national museum. He saw her, 10 years from now, publish a controversial but brilliantly researched book. A book that argued, with compelling evidence, that quirks were not a mark of evolution, but a biological anomaly, a parasitic mutation that was slowly leading humanity towards self-destruction. The book would become a cornerstone of the burgeoning anti-quirk political movement. It would fuel hate groups. It would provide the intellectual justification for a new wave of persecution against those with undesirable or dangerous quirks. He saw riots. He saw lynchings. He saw the smiling face of a charismatic, hateful politician holding up her book at a rally that would end in a bloody pogrom against the neighborhood of heteromorphs. The car accident would have killed one person. Her life's work, a life he had just saved, would be responsible for the deaths of thousands. The air left Deku's lungs in a silent scream. The world tilted, the colors draining away. The katsudon he had eaten that morning churned in his stomach. He stumbled to a nearby patch of bushes and was violently sick. He knelt there, gasping, the acrid taste of bile in his mouth. What had he done? He had played God, and he had failed on a biblical scale. He had traded one life for thousands. He had averted a tragedy only to architect a catastrophe. The hero's dilemma wasn't a trolley problem with 2 tracks. It was a quantum entanglement of infinite tracks, and every time he pulled a lever, a million unforeseen consequences rippled through space-time. Who was he to make these choices? Who was he to judge the value of a life based on a future he could barely comprehend? His drive to save everyone was a child's fantasy, a dangerous, arrogant delusion. The realization broke something deep inside him. The hope, the optimism, the very foundation of his heroism, cracked under the impossible weight. The change in him was no longer subtle. The hollow look returned to his eyes, but now it was laced with a deep, haunted sadness. He was present in classes, he participated in training, but he was a phantom. His movements were precise, his answers were correct, but the vibrant, emotional boy was gone, replaced by a ghost haunted by the future. The distance he created between himself and his friends became a chasm. They tried to bridge it, their efforts a source of constant pain for him. One evening, he was sitting in the common room, ostensibly reading a textbook but actually watching the chaotic, swirling patterns of causality in the steam rising from his tea. Uraraka approached, her expression soft and determined. She sat down beside him, not too close, but close enough to break his self-imposed isolation. Deku-kun, she began, her voice gentle. We're all worried. You're not yourself. You feel so far away. If something is wrong, you can talk to us. You can talk to me. He looked at her, and the pain of his new perception was a physical blow. He saw her, not just as the kind, determined girl beside him, but as a nexus of heartbreaking possibilities. He saw the timeline where his coldness drove her away, where she found happiness with someone else, a simple, safer life. It hurt, but it was a safe hurt. Then he saw the other one again, the darker timeline, the one that had made him flinch away in the hospital. He let his perception fall into it, just for a second, needing to understand the threat. In that future, he had stayed close to her. Their friendship had blossomed into love. They were a hero duo, the symbol of a new generation. But his very presence, his status as the inheritor of One for All and the wielder of this terrible cosmic sight, made him a target. A new villain, one who saw him as an aberration, a disruption to the natural order, had risen. And that villain, unable to defeat Deku directly, had targeted his weakness. He saw the scene in visceral, horrifying detail. He saw the villain holding a broken, bleeding Uraraka in front of him, a cruel smile on his face. He heard the villain's words, the man who sees everything, but is powerless to stop the one thing that matters. He saw the light fade from Uraraka's eyes. He felt his own roar of absolute, universe-shattering grief, a sound that tore reality itself. That grief, that rage, would be the catalyst that pushed him from hero to something else entirely. A vengeful, broken god who would burn the world down to cauterize his own wound. The vision was so powerful, so real, that he could feel the phantom sensation of her blood on his hands. He recoiled from her on the couch as if she were on fire. A strangled gasp escaped his lips. Deku-kun! What is it? Uraraka cried, her face filled with alarm and hurt. He couldn't look at her. He couldn't speak. The future grief was choking him. To protect her, to protect the world from the man he would become if he lost her, he had to cut the thread. He had to be cruel. He had to make her hate him. He stood up abruptly, the textbook falling to the floor with a loud smack. I need some space, Uraraka-san, he said, his voice a blade of ice. He didn't use Achiko-chan. He used her formal name, a deliberate, painful severance. We're training to be pro-heroes. We can't afford to be distracted by personal attachments. I need to focus on my training. Alone. Each word was a dagger he plunged into her, and into himself. He could feel her shock, her hurt, turning into a blooming bruise on her energy field. Her warm, pink nebula dimmed, tinged with the gray of confusion and the blue of sorrow. He saw a tear form in the corner of her eye before she quickly wiped it away. Oh, she whispered, her voice small and broken. I understand. I'm sorry for bothering you. He didn't trust himself to speak again. He turned and walked away, not looking back, the sound of her quiet sob a brand on his soul. He was a hero. He was saving her. But it felt exactly like being a monster. He reached his room, locked the door, and slid to the floor, his back against the wood, the anchor of his own heartbeat lost in a storm of self-loathing. He had saved a stranger and doomed thousands. He had saved his friend by breaking her heart. The burden of a savior was not carrying the world on his shoulders. It was the terrible, lonely knowledge of which pieces of it he had to let fall. The week following his cruel rejection of Uraraka was a descent into a private, silent hell. Izuku Midoriya existed in a state of suspended agony, a ghost haunting the halls of UA High. He performed his duties with robotic precision, his movements economical, his contributions in class technically brilliant but utterly devoid of soul. He was a perfect machine of a hero student, and the humanity was bleeding out of him with every passing moment. He avoided his friends, taking his meals alone and finding secluded corners of the library to study. The hurt he had caused Uraraka was a constant, throbbing wound in the psychic landscape. He felt her carefully managed sorrow, the way her friends, Mina, Tsuyu, Ida, rallied around her, their collective worry for both of them a complex, painful chord in the school's emotional symphony. He saw Bakugo watching him, his usual explosive rage tempered by a new, unnerving watchfulness, his sharp mind clearly sensing that Deku's problem was far more profound than a simple case of post-war trauma. At night, sleep was a battlefield. The faces of the thousands who would die because of the book he had allowed to be written tormented him. He saw the face of the purple-haired girl, living her life, happy and oblivious, a walking time bomb he himself had refused to defuse. He saw Uraraka's tear-streaked face, a wound he had deliberately inflicted. His mantra, save everyone, had become a bitter, ironic joke. He was saving no one. He was just rearranging the casualties. He was on the verge of breaking. The sheer, crushing weight of it all was too much for one person to bear. He considered confessing everything to All Might or Aizawa, but how could he? How could he explain the concept of temporal threads and quantum probabilities to men who lived in a world of solid, reassuring cause and effect? They would think he had truly lost his mind. He retreated into the mindscape of One for All, the only place he could find a semblance of quiet. The vestiges were waiting, their forms somber. This path is unsustainable, Ninth, Nana Shimura said, her voice laced with a gentle but firm urgency. You are trying to carry the ocean in a bucket. You are trying to stop the rain by catching every drop. You will break. I already am broken, Deku whispered, his voice hoarse. He sat on the non-existent floor of the void, his head in his hands. I saved one person and doomed thousands. I hurt my friend to save her from a future that might never happen. Every choice is wrong. Every action has a cost I can't predict. What's the point? How can I be a hero if every time I act, I just make things worse? It was Yoichi Shigaraki who glided forward, his presence a calming balm against Deku's chaotic grief. You are asking the wrong question, Izuku Midoriya. The question is not how can I save everyone. That has always been an impossibility, a child's dream. Your new awareness has only made that truth painfully literal. Then what is the question? Deku asked, looking up, his eyes pleading. The question, Yoichi said softly, is what is my function? You have been given a tool. A terrible, wonderful, all-seeing tool. You have been using it like a hammer, trying to pound every problem flat, and you are discovering that some problems are not nails. You are still trying to be a foot soldier when you have been given the eyes of a general. The words hung in the silent void. A foot soldier. a general. A hero on the front lines saves who is in front of them, Nana continued, picking up the thread of the lesson. They punch the villain, catch the falling civilian, put out the fire. Their focus is immediate, their impact tangible and direct. It is noble and necessary work. But it is not your work anymore. Your new role is not to be the fist, boomed the voice of Daigoro Banjo, the fifth user, stepping forward. It's to be the eye in the sky. You can see the whole board, kid, not just this move, but the next 10, the next 100. You can't stop every piece from being taken. But you can see the path to checkmate. A shift. A subtle but profound change in perspective began to dawn in Deku's mind. He had been focused on the individual threads, trying to untangle every knot, fix every fray. It was an infinite, impossible task. But what if he stopped looking at the threads and started looking at the tapestry? He couldn't stop the drunk driver. He couldn't unwrite the book. He couldn't prevent every accident or every act of malice. But he could see the patterns. He could see the points of maximum leverage. He could mitigate, coordinate, and direct. He couldn't be the hero who saved the person falling from the building anymore. He had to become the hero who told the other heroes where the falling people would be. His purpose wasn't to prevent all suffering. It was to minimize chaos. The change in perspective didn't erase the pain, but it reframed it. The guilt over the girl's future book didn't vanish, but it was contextualized. He had made a mistake based on his old way of thinking. Now, he had to learn a new way. The sorrow over Uraraka remained, a sharp ache in his soul, but he could now see it not as a purely emotional act, but as a strategic one, a terrible, costly, but perhaps necessary sacrifice to prevent a greater catastrophe. He was no longer just Izuku Midoriya, the emotional boy. He was becoming something else. He had to. He left the mindscape not healed, but with a new, grim sense of purpose. He was no longer a hero of the heart. He would have to become a hero of the mind. He would have to learn to be cold, to be calculating, to view the world not as a collection of people to be loved and protected, but as a complex system to be managed. It felt like a betrayal of everything he had ever been, but it was the only path forward that didn't end in madness. He didn't have to wait long to test his new philosophy. The attack came without warning. It was not the brute force devastation of the Paranormal Liberation War. This was something different. It was precise, intelligent, and designed for maximum chaos. It was a symphony of terror, and All for One was its conductor, even from the shadows. At 3 p.m. on a Friday, a series of coordinated events paralyzed the greater Tokyo area. A new, highly organized villain group calling themselves the New Society Front struck simultaneously at 5 key locations. Event 1. A chemical bomb was detonated in the central hub of the Tokyo subway system during rush hour. The gas wasn't lethal, but it was a powerful, fast-acting neurotoxin that induced temporary paralysis and respiratory distress. Thousands of commuters were trapped underground, helpless, in tunnels that were rapidly filling with smoke from secondary incendiary devices. Event 2. A group of villains with powerful vibration and demolition quirks targeted the Rainbow Bridge, the primary artery connecting the mainland to the Odaiba waterfront. They weren't trying to destroy it outright, but to destabilize its core pylons, trapping thousands of vehicles and threatening a catastrophic collapse into the bay. Event 3. A team of speed-type villains initiated a series of hit-and-run attacks on 3 major power substations, causing a cascading blackout across a dozen city wards, crippling communication networks, traffic control systems, and hospital life support systems. Event 4. A villain with a gigantification quirk appeared in the Shinjuku district, creating a classic, brute force distraction, drawing the attention of the highest-ranked local heroes. Event 5. The True Objective. A small, elite squad of infiltration specialists used the chaos to storm the National Diet building, taking dozens of government officials hostage. Their demand: the immediate release of all high-level villains captured during the war, including Gigantomachia. The city's hero network, already strained and rebuilding, was thrown into utter disarray. Pro-heroes were scrambling, responding to the most immediate and visible threats, their efforts scattered and uncoordinated. The system was breaking down. At UA, alarms blared. Aizawa, Vlad King, and the other teachers began coordinating the school's defense, ordering the students to a secure lockdown location. But Deku didn't move. He stood in the common room, his eyes closed, the television blaring frantic news reports behind him. He wasn't watching the news. He was watching the city. The cacophony that had once been his personal hell was now a stream of tactical data. He saw it all. He saw the chemical composition of the gas in the subway and knew it would become inert after 45 minutes. But that lung damage would become permanent in victims after 22 minutes of exposure. He saw the exact stress fractures forming in the Rainbow Bridge's support pylons, calculating a 94% chance of structural failure at the southern pylon in 12 minutes. He saw the flow of electricity through the city's grid, identifying a single, undamaged backup conduit that, if activated, could restore power to the hospitals. He saw the Gigantomachia-type villain in Shinjuku and recognized that its movements were inefficient, its attacks powerful but unfocused, a classic diversion. And he saw the cold, professional intent of the squad in the Diet Building, their calm heart rates a stark contrast to the panic around them. He saw the entire battlefield, a five-pronged attack designed to overwhelm and divide. A problem that couldn't be solved by punching. Midoriya! Get to the shelter now! Aizawa yelled, his voice strained as he barked orders into a communicator. Deku opened his eyes. The haunted, vacant look was gone. In its place was a chilling, absolute certainty. No, he said, his voice calm and clear over the din. Send me to the command center. Aizawa stared at him. What? That's a secure pro-hero facility. You're a student, and you're all flying blind, Deku stated, not with arrogance, but with simple fact. You're reacting to the symptoms, not the disease. I can see the whole board. Every piece. Every move. Get me a headset and a city-wide hero comms channel, and I can end this in under an hour. There was a terrifying authority in his voice, a level of confidence so absolute it was unnerving. Aizawa, a man who trusted logic and observation above all else, looked into his student's eyes and saw something he couldn't explain. He saw a solution. Against his better judgment, against every protocol, he made a split-second decision. Fine, he grunted. Come with me. If you're bluffing, I'll expel you myself. The ad hoc Hero Command Center was organized chaos. Pro-heroes, police commanders, and government liaisons shouted into phones and over monitors displaying conflicting information. Maps of the city were alight with flashing icons of distress, a Christmas tree from hell. Deku, with Aizawa at his side, was given a tactical headset. The moment it was on, he closed his eyes, filtering out the noise of the room and focusing on the pure data stream of the city. He anchored himself, not to his own body, but to the crisis itself, letting his consciousness spread like a web over the greater Tokyo area. Okay, he began, his voice cutting through the panic with unnatural calm. Patch me through to Endeavor. Now, a hesitant technician did so. Endeavor, you have an incoming directive from Central Command. I'm a little busy here. Endeavor's voice roared over the comm, the sound of explosions in the background. He was fighting the giant villain in Shinjuku. Sir, you are being played, Deku said coolly. The Shinjuku villain is a diversion. Its vital signs are unstable. It's burning out its own life force. It will collapse from exhaustion in approximately 15 minutes. Its only purpose is to occupy you, the number one hero. There was a stunned silence from Endeavor's end. Who is this? Your new strategist, Deku replied. Leave 2 of your sidekicks to contain the target. I need you and the rest of your team at the Rainbow Bridge. Its southern pylon will collapse in 9 minutes. You are the only one with the firepower to reinforce it. Use your flames to superheat the surrounding steel beams and fuse them to the damaged section. It will create a temporary, makeshift support. You have to move now. Without waiting for a reply, he turned to the technician. Get me Hawks. The comms channel switched. Hawks here, what's the situation? Hawks, this is Central, Deku said, the title feeling strange and heavy on his tongue. Abandon your aerial reconnaissance of the blackouts. The power grid issue is a secondary concern. I need you at the subway disaster at Kasumigaseki Station. The ventilation systems have been sabotaged, but your fierce wings can create a powerful enough downdraft through the main access shafts to circulate fresh air into the lower levels. It will buy the trapped civilians another 20 minutes before they suffer permanent damage. Can you do it? Consider it done, Hawk's voice replied, a hint of surprise in his tone. Next, Mirko. The rabbit hero's voice was a furious snarl. I'm on my way to the bridge. Change of plans, Deku commanded. Endeavor is handling the bridge. I need you and your speed at the Sumida substation. The villains who caused the blackout are trying to overload the primary transformer to create a cascading EMP blast that will wipe out the entire grid permanently. My intel shows 3 hostiles, all speed types. They're fast, but you're faster. Intercept and neutralize. On it! Mirko yelled, the sound of wind whistling past her comm. Ryukyu. Engaging hostiles near the Diet building, the Dragoon hero's voice came through. Disengage, Deku ordered. Your large form is exactly what they want, a big target to keep the police forces pinned down. The real threat is inside. The hostage takers. But they have a weakness. The building's chief of security is one of the hostages, a man named Kenji Tanaka. In his jacket pocket is a silent alarm that broadcasts on a specific frequency. It's old tech, they wouldn't have looked for it. We can use it to pinpoint their exact location within the building. He turned to a police commander standing nearby, his mouth agape. Get your tactical teams ready. Find that frequency. We can end the hostage crisis without them ever knowing we're coming. And so it went. For 37 minutes, Izuku Midoriya stood like a statue in the center of the command room, his eyes closed, his voice a calm, relentless stream of impossibly precise orders. He was no longer a person. He was a human nexus of information, a living, breathing battle computer. He directed Edge shot through a labyrinthine series of ventilation ducts to reach the subway's central control room. He guided a team of rescue heroes led by Cementos to a structurally sound but hidden access tunnel to begin extracting civilians. He told a police helicopter pilot the exact moment a gust of wind would provide enough cover to approach the Diet building undetected. He saw it all. The fear of the hostages, the adrenaline of the heroes, the smug confidence of the villains turning to confusion and then to panic as their perfect, chaotic plan was systematically dismantled by an unseen, all-knowing opponent. Endeavor, arriving at the bridge with seconds to spare, unleashed a torrent of white-hot fire, fusing the groaning steel of the pylon just as Deku had described. Hawks, creating a miniature cyclone, forced breathable air down into the smoke-filled tunnels, and the sound of coughing victims eased. Mirko arrived at the substation like a thunderbolt, her powerful kicks a blur as she took down the 3 surprise villains before they could trigger the EMP. The final piece was the Diet building. Following Deku's instructions, the police tactical teams, guided by the silent alarm signal, stormed the room where the hostages were being held, achieving complete surprise. The new Society Front's elite squad was apprehended with minimal resistance. At 3:49 p.m., a message came over the main comm channel from the police commander on site at the Diet. All hostages secure. All suspects in custody. The command room, which had been a maelstrom of panic, fell silent. Then, it erupted in a wave of cheers and relieved applause. Deku opened his eyes. He pulled off the headset and placed it gently on the console. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a bone-deep, soul-crushing weariness. He had just coordinated the saving of thousands of lives. He had averted a city-wide catastrophe. He hadn't thrown a single punch. He hadn't used one for all. He had just perceived. Aizawa put a hand on his shoulder, his grip firm. He didn't say anything. He just looked at his student, his expression a mixture of profound awe, deep gratitude, and a sliver of undeniable fear. The problem child he had mentored was gone. In his place stood this grand strategist. This strange, cold, brilliant savior. Deku looked around the cheering room, at the smiling, relieved faces of the pros and police officers. They were celebrating a victory. But Deku felt no joy. He had treated human lives as chess pieces. He had sacrificed emotional connection for cold efficiency. He had won the game. But as he looked at his own hands, he couldn't help but feel that he had lost something far more important in the process. He had saved the city, but he was beginning to worry that he would never be able to save himself.